I'm not here to discuss every parameter and teach you everything about these specific synths inside of Complete Select. In fact, we already have courses on many of these instruments. So what I want to more or less do is kind of show you some things about them and talk about them in the context of Maschine in general. And the first thing is, let's start with Monark because it's definitely one of the best sounding analog emulations out there. Just gorgeous. Here I have it coupled with a couple other plugins on top, but honestly, this is the quintessential synthesizer. NI isn't calling it what it is, but obviously it looks like the Mini Moog, which is probably the most famous synthesizer ever made, and definitely the synthesizer that really started everything out. And I say that it wasn't the first synthesizer, but it really kind of evolved the synth from these large, massive walls of modular synth parts into nice little complex with a keyboard attached, you know, kind of pre-wired to just sound great and be instantly playable. And so that's what you should really be treating Monark like. This is your go-to subtractive synthesizer. I don't think many are going to sound better than this, and believe me that there's a lot of planning that goes in under the hood to actually make this work. So the first thing you need to note is that Monark, if you don't own any of the complete bundles, either Complete or Complete Ultimate, then when you get Complete Select, it will have the Reactor player. In fact, Monark is not its own instrument. It is a Reactor instrument. So if you're unfamiliar with Reactor, there are basically ensembles built inside of Reactor, and Monark happens to be one of those. So with a Reactor player, you're not going to be able to do anything other than play the instrument and browse through presets, really, and obviously turn knobs, but you won't be able to go deeper into other functions like going under the hood, for instance, where you can actually go in and see what an ensemble is actually made of. And that's the beauty of Reactor, is that this is one of those big, large modular walls of synth parts. You can literally create these synths from scratch. You have the building blocks, you have the core fundamentals. If I want to throw in an ADSR envelope, I can literally create that and start patching things in however I like. And if you look at something like Monark, it is beyond deep. Just the oscillators themselves, the oscillator bank, and I mean, this is so much attention has been paid to make this sound very analog-ish, to the point where it's even noisy and the tuning will drift, which is what we would want. So, one thing I want to show you is that when you start with Monark, a good place to be might actually come in and you might want to browse in your instruments, find Monark, and then find the init pattern, which will be the initial, and it's kind of just going to be a nice starting point. One oscillator, nothing fancy. It's going to work from there. Now, I would suggest you actually save this as a spot that you can get to easily. Now, you can easily kind of find it in here, but that just took a little bit of time. I want to key in on two ways to save a sound. The first way is to set this up in your user sounds by simply right-clicking on the name of the sound and hitting save. This will bring up a dialog to go right by default to your user sounds. If I was to save this here under this name, it would now show up in the sound section under my user category. And in fact, I've already made one previously. Now, another way to do it is if you want it to show up in the actual instrument tab under the user library. And there's a way to do that as well. You would have to actually right-click here up in this section, hit save, and with 2.3 you'll see a new little dialog that allows you to type it in, and it will actually show you the path of the standard user directory. If you want to actually look at that, you can double-click, and you'll see instead of in sounds, it's now residing in plugins. And this is just two different ways to work with it. I honestly prefer to save things in the user sounds because, for instance, like this first one, you can actually have machine effects on top of it if you wanted, you know. So you start off and you create extra things, and it's going to be a patch you're going to want to go to over and over. Then try saving it as a user sound. Just a good habit to get into. And the reason I suggest doing that with the initial patch is because Monark is super easy to play and program to the point where you're probably going to want to save it so you can instantly get in, have a blank slate, and just start, you know, turning knobs inside the machine controller, doing whatever you want, and really playing this like a true instrument. So just be aware of the different ways that you can save patches. Sometimes that trips up a lot of people. And in general, you're going to want to use Monark for basses, leads. It's kind of the only synth I use when I need like a straight up dancey bass line. And really, it's works for every genre. Doesn't matter if you're doing hip hop, pop, crazy techno, anything. It works for everything. And it's why they kind of call it Monark, which is the king. It's the king of synthesizers. So enjoy it and really dive into it.